What movement would you mobilize and why?
I would call my movement the mindful movement. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death between people aged 15 and 29. 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their lifetime. So I believe that mobilizing people to strive for mental health would actually fix so many social ills in our society. And that is what I would mobilize.
Yeah, sorry, you broke up there for a moment.
I was asking if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. So I think this question is for both of you. Why is women's mental health so important? Why should we be discussing it today?
Okay, so I can start if it's okay. I mean, I think because, we've come to know that as women we carry a lot of feminine energy, so which means that we feel and connect to things a lot more, and that whatever experiences that we have, they become a part of us in a bigger way. And that doesn't mean that actually men also don't have that. It's just that we are socialized to be more expressive and operate from our emotions more than men are encouraged to, so then we are prone to be affected by the impact of those experiences, especially if they're negative, as much as men are. It's just that, with us, I feel like, it impacts us, in a way that affects our lives even more, I'd like to believe.
Yeah. Samgelisiwe?
I think I'd like to just echo what has said. Women, they have so much more family responsibilities, especially during the pandemic. Taking care of the family, taking care of the health of the family, taking care of their own health. So, I think even though women are the ones who do tend to talk more about their mental makeup, is the hormones, the children, and what society teaches, that has placed a lot of burden on women. And I think it's, also the societal expectation that they're supposed to be able to have as much as they can because they're mother, because they're women, like superwoman.
And does a mental illness like depression then affect women differently to men? And what are the symptoms of anxiety or depression in women?
Okay, so does it affect women differently versus men? Is that what I'm understanding you to be asking, Shudu?
Yes. So does depression affect women differently than men?
So I think again it goes back to how we are socialized. We are socialized to take it in, to be strong and to hold it together for other people. And I think over the years we've come to realize that the different life changes in our lives. Like, for example, I only came to the realization of my anxiety and depression after I've had a child. So then it became associated with postnatal depression. But because of my understanding based on the work that I do and sort of reading up more, I realized that I was clinically depressed, just not diagnosed before I even had a child. That the other experiences and traumatic experiences that I've had, whether as a child or as a young woman, they were stored. The trauma was stored elsewhere in my body, but then when the transition of me becoming a mother happened, then those just got released in a different form. So I'd like to believe that, women are affected differently, especially from a point of view that they are more in a position where they have to put other people first more than men would do. Whereas even if men are affected by mental health, they're not likely to come out and talk about it, and they keep a lot to themselves. Whereas with women, everyone else around us gets affected, and by the time we reach a breaking point, it's really it's seen as a sign of weakness, versus it's actually a sign of strength, of how you've kept things together and trying to hold everyone together. That's the outlook that actually I kind of look at it, to say you have gone through this experience of trying to keep things together and hold everyone together, and meanwhile, you are falling apart.
Samgelisiwe? So are we struggling to hear you?
Yeah, I think if she can also come closer maybe to the screen, it might help, closer to the device. There seems to be, unless if she's muted.
I also like to echo what has been said. So
Oh, we can
I
hear
think
you now.
there's that societal expectations is can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
My camera closer, because I also have it facing at the back. Just switch around and then bring myself a bit closer.
Yeah, that is much better.
Yeah, okay, because it's cutting off every now and then. So I'd also like to echo what has been said about societal expectations. So not so much on a biological level that maybe we could do more, but I think when you think about the different the different layers that are added, like also, for example, postpartum depression is something that every woman can suffer from, and dementia in children. And so there's also that extra layer of having to deal with different phases of what it means, which can often exacerbate the mental illness. So there is a whole lot more based on the place of women, and again, makes this expectation that they can handle it all, and sometimes women don't actually have the help. And if I can just also add one more thing, when it comes to support, when it comes to the nuclear family, often when the nuclear family has been broken down, okay, through substances, let's say a spouse is using substances, a father in the family using substances, the woman is often left behind in the run of those extra expectations and putting the family together. So also that can exacerbate mental health, which then it often does lead to full experience.
And with all of that being said, what both you and Penny have said, how has COVID directly impacted the mental health of women and mental health in general? Because on a daily basis, it's almost like women face so much, and a lot of stresses are added onto their mental health. So how has COVID sort of affected that? Has it exacerbated it? Has it made it easier? Has it because yes, some women, most people are off of work and their lifestyle has changed quite a bit. How has it affected women and their mental health?
So from what obviously has come out in terms of numbers, but before we even just talk about numbers, a lot of us have had to find ourselves in confined spaces because of the restrictions. And then, there's been a situation with women who are in abusive relationships and had to find themselves with the perpetrators and people who actually are their abusers. And that has sort of put more pressure. But more than anything else, again, the women had to find themselves holding it together, because firstly they have to maintain the balance, keeping the work for those who are working at home, managing their children, and and it's sort of like helping that family cope with the stresses and the challenge that comes with this change which COVID has brought into our lives. But then, you know, already there, you're worried about your finances, you're worried about the health of your children, you're worried about making sure that you're performing at work. So that has tripled the pressure. And if you also happen to have a challenge of like a job security being a problem, you're worried about job losses, and then there's issues of like you know, obviously of living with a perpetrator or being confined with you know, with someone who you are not on good terms with, and that can be you know, a trigger you know, as well, because you know, whereas you're taken out of your routine and your system that you sort of like have been using to manage you know, and cope with your mental health, but these restrictions have kind of like, I believe, you know, have exacerbated the situation, but also the pressure of having to also look after everyone has made it a bit of a challenge. I mean, the numbers do speak for themselves, and that's a world over problem, not just a South African situation.
Samgilisio? Okay, I think I don't know if we've lost her.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
So I'm going to see what can you hear?
I'm having a bit of network issue.
Sorry.
So sorry.
I can have bits and pieces of the conversation, but I keep cutting off.
So maybe she can try and like log off and log on.
I think so
try
too.
log off and log on. Yeah, maybe that will help. So if she can log off and log on, and then
Okay,
I think that will help.
Let me add her again.
Okay. Yes. Maybe that move. That's technology. It just does things to us.
But-
Before you know it.
But with what you were saying, it's so true, because we are mothers, especially, and women, and natural nurturers, so
Yeah.
they worry about everyone else around them before they even worry about themselves. So one can just imagine how all of this, trying to take care of everything and everyone, has exacerbated their mental health. And I want to ask you, how have you or the women around you been affected? If you have been affected in that, is what you were saying a personal experience, and what have you seen with other women around you?
So, you know, the time of COVID, what it has been able to teach me is it's sort of like how do you apply what you know. You know, I've come to appreciate with mental health and anxiety in the past, because it means that I have been able to develop you know, a management system, and I'm very careful of using like a coping, like the word coping, because we kind of like have bastardized the word, but that's really what I mean. Is like, what sort of like things do you have to manage your mental health? Because for me, mental health is about it's about managing it. And because I came to dealing with my mental health, you know, over 15 or 16 years ago, I understood that I had to change my lifestyle. You know, I had to eat healthy, sleeping is important, drinking water, exercising. And what I found myself having to deal with during this time is really reinforcing the things that I have been doing for years. And then I also realized that people who've never really have come face to face with their mental wellness, you know, we're easily equipped to be able to manage. But I mean, which is why I do the work that I do with South African depression and anxiety, to advocate for that, to disseminate as much information. Because ultimately it's about that. It's about how is this COVID situation, how it's going to affect us, and what are the things that you can put into place to help you manage, you know? And so for me, yes, I have been overwhelmed through this time. Yes, I have been anxious. You know, yes, there's moments where I felt helpless and I felt sad. But what I've come to appreciate about understanding, having dealt with mental wellness for as long as I have, is that you go through the process to get to the other end, and you use whatever skills that you have to be able to manage. And the first place to say I am is to acknowledge whatever emotion you're dealing with at the time, or whatever experience. I am overwhelmed right now. I'm not being able to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and therefore that means you're taking control of the situation and you're managing the situation. And a lot of women in my life have, that's the kind of information that we've been sharing, and a lot of guys too, because that's the other thing. And children, because we have children at home. So my concern was, how are the children coping with not being able to socialize? How are they managing that? How do we manage basically being online all the time? When is it an offline? And those kind of things are sort of like systems that you need to have under normal circumstances. But in the situation that we're in, it's like, how do you reinforce that so that you are able to manage through this process?
And I'm so happy that you've basically put it out there that you need to acknowledge how you feel when you feel it without invalidating, like yourself. Because I think even during this time, a lot of us, even when we're feeling overwhelmed, we don't really want to admit it, because you just feel like you have to rise above every single situation. But I remember my therapist telling me that it's important to focus on the small victories. You're living through a pandemic. You shouldn't forget that in your daily life, because as soon as you do that, you are not acknowledging how you feel or where you are in that present moment. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Sangelisio, I wanted to ask you, how has COVID affected women, and what have you seen in your practice, if there are any cases?
Yeah, I think COVID has been very, very difficult for women. I think, there's just so many themes that, so many psychological themes that have linked up to what's happening, in the world and globally with COVID. I think it's loss, it's having to manage schoolwork, it's having to manage school routines that are no longer, as they were before. It's having to also deal with the closed home setting, where the woman is supposed to be the one that does more in the home setting, trying to keep everybody else calm while trying to keep them. This period has been very tough on, I can say, filling the cup. Whereas women would be able to fill their cup with their extramural activities, going out with friends, and actually essentially being away from the home environment. But now being in the home environment has been basically the only option, and that has been very difficult for women to actually try and cover all routines, make sure the kids' routines are covered as well, and take care of their own mental health. So it's actually seen a lot of increase of stress and anxiety. And I think also there's that sense of impotence of knowing that, you want to take care of your family, you want to make sure your children are healthy, but the usual flu shots or making sure you have a medicine cabinet stocked with medication is no longer an option. And it's that feeling of fighting an invisible enemy that has often been felt for a lot of the patients that I've seen, very overwhelming and very difficult to actually manage the stress as well. So what has definitely helped is to just be honest about it and not pretend as if everything is going to be fine, and be able to ask for help where you can the most.
With all of that being said, there's still like a lot of stigma that is associated with women and mental health. Words like emotional, neurotic are thrown around when describing women, like weak and stuff like that. So how do you encourage a woman who's feeling everything that she's feeling without a woman who feels like if she admits that that she's overwhelmed and she's going through so much, or she's not coping as well as she'd like to, how do you encourage a woman in that position to seek help? Because especially if you, most industries are very much male dominated. We live in a patriarchal society. As soon as you admit the way that we are openly discussing now, that hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed, that I'm not okay, it's almost feeding into those stereotypes. But how do we change those? How do we change that? How do we change the stigma that is associated with women and mental health?
Okay. Because I come from like an advocacy work and working in media, for me, I feel that it's very important that we have these kind of conversations like we're having to openly talk about issues of mental health. I have personally been advocating in that space for the last 15 years or so, and because of the very reason that you just mentioned, that there was a stigma about it, and it goes as far as people labeling you crazy and unstable, amongst other things, which are can be negative. But I think we've come to a place right now in the world where we have seen, very, very public conversations about the importance of self-care, the importance of removing the stigma. I mean, policies are there that says, companies need to adhere to that when it comes to issues around mental health. But it's a case of, these companies, acting on what the policy says. But they're not going to act on that until individuals in those spaces actually say, I am not okay. And it's
We can't hear you.
I am...
No, I can hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm saying it's up to individuals who are in those situations to really take the risk of saying, I'm going to speak up for myself. I'm going to say I need help. I'm not okay. I'm overwhelmed, and I will perform at my best. When I am feeling better. And I think as unfortunate as COVID is, it presents an opportunity to actually people to show up for themselves like that. We've seen it happening at the Olympics. We've seen it with stars like Naomi Osaka. We've seen it with conversations like Meghan Merkel. We've seen that, and it means that it's the time for us to have that. So anybody that still wants to be stuck in stigma is really obviously not evolving with the world that we're in. I mean, we've seen it with the work that you do. You came on to the platform and you advocated for that. And it's building on work that's been done over years. But I think the most important thing now, we need to get to a place where we even teach our children that, that our children understand, the different emotions and what it means to be overwhelmed, during this time. So as a mother, for example, for me, it's very important that I ask the children, how are you feeling? Do you want to continue with online school? Do you want to go to school every day? And if you feel like you want to go today, but if you wake up tomorrow and you change your mind, it's okay. And I think we need to come to that level where we stop. The only way to stop stigma is about it takes us talking about things and talking about it openly, with sincerity and honesty of trying to help people really.
And how do you think we break the stigma and the myths around women and mental health, Sambelisiwe? No, we can't hear you.
Sorry, is this for me now?
Yes, it's for you. It's for you.
Okay. I don't know how much you're hearing, but I'm going to respond to the fact that how do you change the stigma around COVID and mental illness, and especially when women are involved. And again, I'd like to co-echo what Penny has said, which is, we need to actually not stop holding the flag high when it comes to mental health awareness, and actually reminding people that, you know, women are still, you know, struggling with a lot of stigmas. Women are still actually being placed in certain boxes and labels, and it's that campaigning, whether it's, you know, something that's said on Twitter, spreading awareness, or just informing yourself about what's happening in the world, so that you don't feel the sense of, oh, it's just me. I'm using, for example, difficult times during my period as an excuse to not go to work, to be stigmatized on things that are specific to females, and you actually see what's happening. For example, Penny mentioned a celebrity or star was suffering with some kind of mental illness. The same goes for the gymnastics lady who also just decided, you know, it's actually not Facebook at this current time to continue with the gymnastics during the Olympics, and decided to actually raise the flag high for mental health. And I think it's important to actually come together, not only as women, but to lobby and campaign together, get people involved, get your boss involved, be the brave person that writes that letter to actually explain what you're going through and why it's important to be heard. And the stigma will slowly change, because we live in a society where the dominant narrative is always to undo all the good.
We're struggling to hear you.
Or undo all the importance and actually understanding that women have a voice. They need to have a voice when it comes to healing themselves, healing their families. So it's an active thing, and it's an attitude that should be, or, you know, that is, you know, recommended to be adopted by a lot of women to try and change the stigma around. Because without campaigning and talking about it, it can easily fall.
I think we've lost her.
But
we
have.
Something that you touched on is speaking up, like speaking up so the conversation can be heard, because you mentioned that there are structures in place that are there to help, you know. But how do we encourage and create more safe spaces for women to talk about their mental health and struggles, and why is it so important for them to openly speak about their mental health? So in terms of creating safe spaces, how do we encourage women to even speak up when the possible response is what you were saying, how you could be labeled crazy and unstable or even weak in some instances? So how do we encourage them in that regard and create more safe spaces? What can colleagues do? What can friends do? What can family members do as well?
So I think the first place really to start is to get in the workplace, because then once, you know, it's like that, you have information that you can be able to engage them with, but then at the same time, you are empowered enough to know how to take care of yourself under that environment, because that's the most important thing. You know, it's not just about being concerned about how many leave days I have and then what am I going to do with them, but it's about what are the policies of mental health in the space that I work in, and you know, if we are in a team and then we're all under pressure, am I the only one who's not coping under the circumstances? Chances are you're likely not to be the only one, because that's the other thing that we tend to do, is we think I'm the only one who's going through this. And I've come to learn and appreciate that as women, you know, we are on the same journey, but we might not be at the same stop at the same time. But, you know, the life cycle that we go through takes us through those things. And those of us who might have had experiences ahead of others. If we talk about those things, what we can be able to do by that is to empower those who are coming behind us, and therefore they're equipped to be able to talk about such things. It's like, when I started talking about my postnatal depression experience, I got a lot of women who were older than me, who were like, at the time I was like in my 20s, people who were in their 40s and 50s and saying, this happened to me when I gave birth in the 70s. I didn't know what it was. Because again, we didn't have words to express these experiences that we were having. So the more we talk about them, the more we engage from, an individual, woman to woman, or in the workplace, the more we're able to identify these things, and therefore those who could be coming after us, they sort of like have a path where they're able to walk to deal with similar situations. I mean, that's why for me, I talk to my children about, mental health, and I had to start talking to them about it as early as possible because it's an experience that I had, and I'm an advocate for that. So I started, doing things like saying to my children, there's things that maybe you feel that you don't know how to express. Why don't you write money and notes? Are you feeling sad? Are you angry? What's making you angry? Do you want to talk about it? And then if you can't talk to me, can you talk, to my brother? But creating that kind of, and it really starts there. It starts at home with sort of like trying to create those kind of tools. So whether it's, encouraging your children to come to you about things, to write things down, to use, symbols to express how they feel, and those kind of things go a long way. And once you're able to kind of like do things like that, you gain a confidence, because remember we talked about focusing on the small wins, and sometimes it's just about, I woke up today, I got out of bed, I was able to make myself something to eat. It's a small win.
It's a small win.
And it's a small win. It's like I woke up, I put on my sneakers, I took a walk, for 30 minutes just to get fresh air. Or I stood outside and I listened to the, I watched the sky. But those little things, and I think, because if we start teaching and speaking about how those little things change, like drinking water, sleeping, one of the things that I also used to talk to a lot of like young people, especially in the industry that I'm in, I'm like, do you sleep? And then they're like, huh? I'm like, do you eat? Because people are not sleeping, they're chasing the clock, they're not eating well, and all of those things contribute, to your mental wellness in the long run. And if we want to talk about helping people be equipped, it starts with that. But it involves everything. It involves your health. It involves how you take care of your body. It involves how you take care of your thoughts. It involves how you understand your own emotions. And for women, it's even more imperative because we have a cycle. There's ovulation and there's all of those things. They affect us one way or the other. And being in touch with ourselves and our body and understanding the environment that we're in actually equips us to be able to deal better with the situation that we might find ourselves in.
And earlier, you spoke about how some of your coping, or you don't like using coping, but some of the mechanisms that you use include eating healthy, drinking water, getting enough sleep. Are there any other coping mechanisms or self-care tips that you have? And I also just wanted to ask, for a woman that's probably asking right now, what kind of treatment is available for women who are experiencing mental health issues or struggling to cope?
So, from the experience that I've had, depending on the level of depression and anxiety, or whatever level you might be dealing with your mental health, if you're consulting a professional, whether they put you on medication, you sort of, I think ultimately it starts with, you need to do you need to do an overview of how is my life. So personally, only on the occasion when I had my son and then I had to be admitted and put on medication was I ever on medication. And while I was there, I was exposed to talk therapy. I was exposed to what other things can I do, like using essential oils to relax myself. So I needed to start understanding my temperament. I understood that my work environment is full of pressure. How do I cope with it? What are the things that I can do to relax me? What are the things that I can do to prepare myself? You know, and what do I, you know, stressing situation? You know, what are the triggers of the thing? And, you know, who are the people who are triggers? What are situations that are trigger? So I had to take time to understand, you know, who's Penny and what are the things that affect me externally that they have an impact on my mental health. And then I had to make choices for myself to say, okay, I need to boost my omega-3. What are the things that I do? You know, I'm going to cut out on eating this. I'm going to eat more fish. You know, I'm going to increase more vegetable. Okay, so, you know, what agreements can I have with myself? You know, am I going to now obsess about losing weight because I'm working in a pressured industry where you have to look a certain way? No, I'm going to, you know, focus on vitality and you know, and fueling my energy and feeding myself, you know, food and doing exercise that are going to help me manage, you know, my weight without the pressure of being obsessed. You know what I mean? So those kind of conversations, it's almost like you need to do a stock taking of your own life and what, you know. So it's there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't say to people, don't get on medication because I'm not on medication. But I wanted to take control of my life in that way. I wanted to understand holistically. So I took a holistic approach to managing my mental health. You know, somebody else might be in a situation that's extreme. You know, obviously if you're hospitalized, you might be put on medication because that's what you require at that time. But ultimately, when you come out of that environment and you're going home, you still have to find mechanisms and tools that work for yourself. So if, for example, you have to be at work at like 8 in the morning, you need to figure out, you know, how do I manage that? I fit in exercise, I fit in a healthy meal before I go to work, do I prepare the meal? You know, you need to take control of your life in that way. And it's the little things that you can do. Obviously, it's different when you are in a breaking point, when you're having a breakdown. You know, and when you're having a breakdown, you have to rely on you know, on if you have access to a doctor, that's it. But if you're going to therapy constantly, that's part of helping you, you know, skill yourself to be able to manage, you know, with your mental health. And you know, there's little things that we take you know, for granted. Going for a walk, being in touch with nature. I came to understand that, you know, that silence of, you know, of being in touch with nature can silence the noise, and that's really. I work in a very noisy environment. How do I plug out of my work? Because that's that. I have headphones all the time. I'm playing music. I'm talking. You know. So I was like, what are the things that I can use to plug out? You know what I mean? And you can start. People always say, "Oh, I don't have time." You can start with 10 minutes for yourself. 10 minutes of silence. You can start with things like, "I'm not going to answer my phone between this time and this time because it's good for me." And once you start putting those boundaries for yourself, that comes back to you, because what you're doing is you're investing in yourself and you are protecting your mental health. And you know, and then it even goes deeper as women, because we're intuitive, we're sensitive, we feel things. You're also protecting your energy. The more the more you learn about yourself. And I always say to people, I said, you know, my experience with mental health and depression actually was so empowering for me, because I got to know myself better. But more than anything else, I get to speak from a personal experience, and when I share about it, it's not just content that I picked up and I'm just like, yeah, that's that. I can say this has worked for me and this is how it works, and this is the information that's out there and what you can do. And you know, sometimes people think self-care is running a hot bath and giving it a that. It's more than that. You know, it's eating healthy, it's sleeping, it's having boundaries, it's watching what you eat. You know, and it's like when I realized that sugar is not good for me, I got rid of it. You know what I mean? So it's all of those. So you're constantly discovering, learning, unlearning, and you get in touch with yourself to understand, when I'm under pressure, this is how I'm likely to react. You know, and also you know, you can be obsessed with doing everything. You realize that, oh, it's okay actually to not do anything. You know what I mean? So those are the kind of things that I had to use over time.
And funny enough,
and a good support system.
Yes, good support system as well. But funny enough, you talk about how sometimes doing nothing at all is the best kind of medicine, because there's this thing in society where we romanticize burnout, like getting to a point where you are burnt out. That's when you're doing enough. That's when you're going to be a success. That's when, and imagine how it's like for women who always have to work 2 times as hard just to get to a place where they are on an equal playing field with a man. So it's quite an important message to tell young people and young girls that, listen, some days you're just gonna need to rest, switch on so whatever you want to watch on TV and just relax and not feel guilty about the fact that you're not doing anything. And I had to learn that as well in terms of my mental health as well. Like, I don't constantly have to be under stress in order for things to go well in my life. I don't constantly have to be under stress every single time in order to be successful. Sometimes success is just taking a step back, breathing in and out, and just allowing the air to come in. And the journey that we have with our mental health is a constant learning and unlearning about things about yourself, you know, and that takes time, where you, like you're saying, you plug out and just go into nature and just silence the noise. But until you silence the noise, it's going to be very difficult to listen to what your body needs, what your mind needs, what your heart needs. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. I just wanted to ask you in closing, it's Women's Month, so I wanted to find out, what are some of your favorite quotes or mantras about women that inspire you?
Whoa, shots. Quote, mantras. Wow, I didn't think of that. But I mean, you know, like...
Still I rise.
The Still I Rise. And then there's that one that says, you know, there's a special place in hell for a woman who doesn't help other women.
Yeah.
And then... and then there's... and then there's... Shucks. Which other ones do I... Oh, I mean, I think others is just affirmations that I use, like, you know, that I'm beautiful, I'm strong.
Yeah.
You know, I have ability to do things.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, affirmations like that, and to say that, you know, I am managing my mental health to manage under every circumstances. So it's those kind of things, and then there's prayers. You know, I can do all things through Christ to strengthen me. And you know, women who've come before me, you know, and you know, who are helping me, you know, that I'm walking in their footsteps, that I'm part of a bigger connection of women. So those are the kind of things that really help me on a daily basis, is that I constantly feel that I'm responsible for myself, but I am learning I'm sharing for those who are coming up, to those who are coming after me, but I am because they were.
Yeah.
You know? So these are the women who've come before me, and it's little things like that every day. You know, that I'm divine. I work with Mother Nature to make the world a better place. So those are the kind of things that just help me to keep going, because one of the things that Covert has taught us is that we are more connected than we are separated.
Yes.
And you know, if we can find ways to connect with each other, you know, it would be even more powerful. But I'm also very intentional about my divinity with other women, how I connect with like the divine feminine power, and how I work with other women, you know, how I champion causes that will benefit all of us and collectively, whether it's for my 12-year-old daughter, whether it's for a young woman like yourself, but it's also to affirm women who've come before us, because some of them didn't have words to say the things that we're saying today, but to constantly connect with stories of generations before, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the work that they've done. I mean, Still Arise, an amazing body of work by Maya Angelou. So things like that, things like that.
No, thank you so much for sharing part of yourself with us tonight. It's been absolutely amazing, and I hope that for those that are watching, as you said, just it's important for us to speak up, to start the conversations, bring the conversations into our workplaces, into our homes, into our communities and schools, and with your children if you've got children, because that's how we destigmatize mental health for the next generation as well, by starting them while they're young and just encouraging them to just speak about their emotions. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely beautiful. In a relationship,
especially
yes.
in our relationships as well. Yeah, and especially with men, because we are faced with a lot of challenges where our men were socialized to hold on to a lot of emotions. And part of the challenges that we have with our mental wellness as women is the experiences that we've had with men. So we need to also cultivate opening up about these, vulnerability is one of the most important thing as well for me, with all my friends, all male and female, queer and otherwise, that let's have these conversations. Let's go back to those places where we've been afraid to go, because once we open those layers, we help ourselves heal, but we heal through each other, as well.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. You have been
Thank you.
absolutely amazing. Thank you so much to everyone that watched. I hope you guys are keeping safe and are good. See you guys next week, Monday. Love you guys.